Welcome to Midlife Hormone Crisis, where healthy harmony just sounds like a cruel joke once midlife hits. It's time to get real about what midlife women are truly facing. This rebrand isn't just a new name. It's recognizing what season you are in. It's a commitment to you, the health-conscious, holistic-minded woman navigating the overwhelming maze of midlife changes. I know you're busy, juggling all the responsibilities and feeling so frustrated that traditional medicine is not giving you the answers that you desperately need. You deserve more. All the health strategies you used before, they don't seem to make a difference now. And all of these symptoms, the anger surges, the anxiety, the brain fog, the belly fat, the joint pain, not to mention, what are those weird smells and why am I so itchy? It makes you wonder, am I having a midlife crisis or is it just my hormones? If you're pissed off and perimenopausal, this is the place for you. Welcome to the Midlife Hormone Crisis podcast. Strategies to avoid the symptoms, the insanity, and the body breakdown of perimenopause. I'm your host, Jennifer Pickett, a deprogrammed dietitian turned functional medicine health coach and certified midlife hormone specialist and creator of the Hormone Huddle. So before I introduce today's guest, let me tell you about a must-have guide just for you. If you're already feeling the chaos of the holidays piling on top of your midlife symptoms, the exhaustion, the brain fog, the weight gain, I'm here to tell you, you're not alone. The holiday season can make it so much worse, and I get it. So that is why I created the Holiday Hormone Trap. Top 10 mistakes to avoid. And this free guide is packed with realistic tips to help you dodge the most common pitfalls that can really amplify all of those hormonal symptoms. So do yourself a huge favor, grab this guide. You can simply look in the show notes or go to the link bit.ly/hormone trap. So let me introduce today's speakers. It is just fitting that this first episode of the rebrand Midlife Hormone Crisis, my guests are my mentors. So Kristin Johnson and Maria Claps are co-founders of Wise and Well. They are top experts in perimenopause and menopausal health. And they have been my mentors on this journey to becoming a certified midlife specialist. Kristin Johnson is a board-certified holistic nutritionist and functional nutritional therapy practitioner. She is also a former corporate attorney. Maria Claps is a certified health coach, a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and she specializes in hormone health. With absolutely extensive training under top medical doctors, hormone specialists, naturopaths, they really bring advanced expertise in hormone replacement therapy and functional testing. They mentor and train health practitioners. They're faculty lecturers for Women's Hormone Network, and they are frequent speakers at health summits and on podcasts. And they are also authors of a new book, an absolute must-have book for you called The Great Menopause Myth. This is an absolute must-have for every midlife woman. I was looking for my copy. It's right here. So I'm so excited that they are the first guest on this podcast. By the way, if you're listening on the podcast, please know that Midlife Hormone Crisis is now featured on YouTube. So I'm excited to offer that as well. So let's welcome our guests, Kristin and Maria. Today's one of my favorite days. I'm so happy to have my mentors, Kristin Johnson, Maria Claps, on the podcast. I absolutely adore these women. I think they're absolutely brilliant. So you guys, welcome. Thank you. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. It was such a nice intro. I'm blushing a little bit.
We've got so much to cover today, so we're going to jump right in. I know you guys are really busy. You're pressed for time, so thank you for giving me your time because you've been launching your new book. So how is everything going with the book launch?
It's been intense and busy, but fun at the same time.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. All good.
I love it. So, okay, the first question, I think there's so much misunderstanding about menopause. That's why you named your book, The Great Menopause Myth. There is so much misunderstanding. It's very confusing, very overwhelming for women. We're not getting the information we needed. I was on this learning journey trying to research frantically before I found your mentorship. And then it was like all these light bulbs turning off. But as I shared with you before, the more I learned, the more pissed off I got because I'm like, I should not have had to go to this much trouble to learn this. But man, I'm so glad I did. So give a brief definition of menopause and what a woman can expect. What's important to know in this process? Because there's some like conflicting information out there. What's perimenopause? What's menopause?
Yeah. So Maria, you can take the kind of perimenopause discussion and then we'll kind of get into why menopause is confusing.
Sure. So perimenopause, let's start with menopause. Menopause is that one day that you've gone 12 months without a menstrual cycle. And then perimenopause is just those changing years, anywhere from, 4 to some people say 10 years. I have my doubts about it being that long, but we'll say, X number of years leading up to that. It's the 40s for most women, the perimenopause years. And then that day that you reach, we'll say 12 months and a day, after your last menstrual cycle, that is the postmenopausal phase of life. And yes, I got into a bit of a verbal scuffle with a woman yesterday who said, no, you're not post because that means that you're past, that you're over it, that you're beyond menopause. You never get beyond it. I said, I'm not wordsmithing with you. This comes from the stages of reproductive aging workshop plus 10. This is considered the postmenopausal phase of life. So anyway. Yeah.
I think the problem is this, everything that has been told to women about perimenopause and menopause focuses on the cycle, right? Yes. And it focuses on the menstrual cycle and the loss of that menstrual cycle, the changes in it that precede the eventual loss of it. This is problematic for women, particularly in today's world, because there are women in their 40s on the birth control pill who don't cycle because they choose not to use the placebo pills. There are women who've had an ablation. They don't cycle. There are women who had an IUD. They don't cycle. That doesn't mean because there's an absence of a cycle that they are menopausal or not, right? They need to understand that this is really about the ovarian production of sex hormones. Yes, we can artificially shut those down with interventions through pharmaceuticals. Not super healthy, but plenty of women do it for a variety of reasons. But what women need to understand is it's not just the loss of the cycle. It's the loss of the homeostatic regulation of the entire female body that is being lost as our sex hormones decline, as the ovaries stop their natural production of it. We start to lose whole body health. And that's kind of the groundbreaking thing that is starting to be discussed a little bit, but it's what we based our book off of because we wanted women to understand that this intense focus on cycling, not cycling, etc., is completely obscuring the real imperatives that are going on here. We're losing our health because of the loss of our ovarian function. That's what's menopause.
I love that. I love that definition. And I think what shocked me the most is to start to learn and understand that hormonal decline, that ovarian production, it starts happening a lot sooner than most of us realize. I think we're kind of waiting until we get close to 50 to kind of wake up and be concerned. So how early does that hormonal decline start happening?
Well, it's really highly variable because that is perimenopause is a time of hormone decline. People think it's just hormones shifting, but they're actually in their decline at that point. They're shifting and declining. Those are not mutually exclusive concepts for perimenopause.
And the studies show that starts at 35. We know that at 35, the ovarian production, the robust production, does start its decline. When does it become disruptive? That's a completely different conversation. Yeah. So
it's amazing how early it happens. And let me ask you this: for a woman who is perimenopausal, she's like, okay, I'm in my mid 40s. Do I need to know where I'm at in the process? Is there importance to be able to like put a title, a diagnosis, a definition to where you're at in the process? What is most important right now at this point?
Well, I mean, you hit on one of mine and Maria's biggest kind of issues right now in the interwebs and social media, is that everyone wants to label themselves and where they are in this transition as though that's important. And though we don't mean to say your lived experience of what disruptions and health changes you might be experiencing aren't important, but it's not important to put a label on it, because ladies in perimenopause, you're not special. You're all just going through the same aging process with your ovaries that the rest of us have gone through. We're all headed to the same destination, which is ultimately to be hormonally deficient if we're not choosing to restore our hormones. So do we need to know? No, because the imperatives are the same for all of us. You need to be focused on your metabolic health like no other thing in time at this juncture of your life. Your metabolic health matters. You need to be living a life that is low inflammation, that's not triggering these certain things, because the hormonal loss is going to trigger it as well. Why does it seem to matter so much to know where you are? I think we just like to have titles and labels and put ourselves in boxes in this world today, because it's become a very bit of a tribal group think sort of attitude. And we're saying, again, it doesn't matter. Every single one of us who are born with ovaries are going to lose our sex hormone production at a certain point. And there are women who lose it much earlier for health reasons and pharmaceutical reasons. And there are women who, might hang on to it to their 50s, and they might have still a cycle and they think that everything's fine. It does not matter. It's just midlife is a time in which we are vulnerable to massive declines in our health because of the loss of these ovaries. So we need to get really serious about our daily nutrition, our daily movement, our sleep, our stress management, everything else. And we need to get educated on hormone replacement so that if we choose to do it, we are ready to do it.
Yes. And we're not waiting until the bottom is falling out. I think that's where I was so very frustrated, because I wasn't cycling, because I've had a uterine ablation. So I'm trying to research, and I'm like, okay, so do I just wait for the bottom to fall out? Like, what do I do? So this is, this podcast really speaks to our listeners are they want to be proactive. They're just trying to figure out what to do to be proactive. So I think you spoke to that so well. How do we be proactive? And it really looks at that systems approach. I like to call it a body system blueprint, which is what I have in the hormone huddle, because you've got to look at all of these different systems. So let's tap into that just very briefly, is how all these body systems interplay with the sex hormones. Let's look at gut health first. Will you just kind of touch on briefly how your gut and the sex hormones, that interplay is so very strong?
Well, yeah, it's got a very circular relationship. So, your gut has estrogen receptors, and your gut also has to kind of process and methylate your estrogen. Well, that process actually runs on estrogen as well. So methylation helps estrogen, and estrogen helps methylation. So, and methylation, for those who don't know, I don't mean to be purposely using big words. It's just a detox process, a way that your body is able to detox. And that's just a fancy word, but it does require all of these body processes do require estradiol actually to work well. So, you're also losing microbiome diversity, and diverse microbiome is so incredibly important for health, particularly health as we are aging. It's really thought like one of the kind of hallmarks of supercentenarians is the ability to maintain a diverse microbiome. So, yeah. That's
Most
why.
definitely. It
Yeah.
is incredible to understand how just your hormones declining affects your gut health. And so many women, I've been in this space for so long, this whole gut health world, my kids tease me because I talk poop every day. I just, inevitably a woman will say, this is too much information, and I'm like, no, it's not. That's my world. That's where I'm most comfortable. So we have to go there. But so many women are struggling with significant gut health issues, and those issues are dramatically impacting their quality of life. When they cannot travel, when they cannot go to work without fear of, okay, am I going to have some issues here? And they're not getting help conventionally with traditional medicine. So it's something we have to look at. But I think it's so interesting how that plays together. One of the things that I think is not talked about enough is adrenal function and how important that is. So touch on adrenal function and the HPA axis, because I think that is something crucial, that a crucial component women are missing today.
I mean, the adrenals need their little acorns that sit atop our kidneys. They are usually connected in most people's conventional thinking to our stress management and our stress capability. They've kind of gotten a bad rap because they pump out something called cortisol, and now people think cortisol is bad, but cortisol is literally the juice of life. It keeps us running. It's really important for us. We want it. It just needs to be a really well-managed system. Again, it's that systems approach, right? We have a brain connection, that's the HPA axis, down to the adrenals, and they need to be communicating, surveilling the system, and figuring stuff out as to whether or not the body needs cortisol, what rhythms, what time of day, et cetera, et cetera. So the adrenals, yes, can have handle or affect our stress handling. They can affect our sleep, things like that. But we do have some sex hormone production out of the adrenal glands. And so women will be convinced that they're going to early perimenopause because they're having cycle changes, when in the reality is they probably have fairly disrupted HPA axis dysfunction with their adrenal glands. And that is actually sending signals to the body that say, whoa, slow down. This body should not be producing robust hormones because it's not a time in which they should be procreating. Therefore, we're going to downregulate that system. So there's a lot of crosstalk between the brain, the adrenals, and the ovaries. And as women age, we tend to kind of throttle our ovaries a little bit through interventions like under eating, over exercising, not having good digestion, so we don't absorb the right minerals for our adrenal function, things like that. And then we have overloads of stress. And, a stressed body is a body that's not going to function well. The system starts to break down. That will affect hormonal production. And again, it might be that you are in peri and you do have actual declining ovarian function. But if you have a dysregulated HPA axis with your adrenals, you are going to be dealing with peri-like symptoms that might not actually be peri.
It's just such a crucial topic. And anytime we talk about stress management, a lot of women almost get a little bit offended. Like, are you trying to tell me I'm not handling this? Mm-hmm. And the reality is that our body is living in survival mode and our health is suffering as a result of that. A lot of women are having all these thyroid issues. So touch on that and how that interplay. And I love how you put crosstalk, how the thyroid hormones and the sex hormones, how those are talking to each other.
Sure. So the thyroid, it's so interesting. And we do seem to be in an epidemic of mostly low thyroid issues amongst midlife women and even some men and younger women as well. But the thyroid, we kind of like the ovaries, does seem to take a hit with age. So we have that. But there's also, unfortunately, we're not going to necessarily solve every little thing about this, but we kind of live in a toxic environment, right? And I just think about, I think about how I used to spray like perfume and I'd put it like right here.
Yep, me too. Right there.
Mm-hmm. Thin skin, and then thyroid is very like susceptible to kind of just toxic exposures, unfortunately. So there's that, right? There's the environment we live in, there's aging. And then the thyroid is metabolic engine of the body, and the thyroid likes progesterone, but progesterone also needs good thyroid function to be made. So, estrogen is good for the thyroid, but too much, or, it can create binding proteins. That can be a problem as well. So It's a little bit of a delicate balance, and that's why we say women do absolutely have to look into thyroid function as they're aging. I know mine was really, really great up until I was about 45 or so, and then numbers just started plummeting. And who knows? Is it aging? Is it toxin exposure? It's probably a little bit of both, actually.
Yeah. I would think everything that we just covered, ovary function, adrenal function, thyroid function. One of the things that's frustrating for me and Maria right now is there's too much focus on as if these things are happening to women. And women are not sort of owning their own contributions to the system disruption that's going on. And I know that's probably going to make some people mad, but at the end of the day, if there are plenty of calls for like, why didn't we have all of these problems, 3 generations ago? And people will say, well, because there wasn't toxins, or there wasn't the stress load, or there wasn't the light disruption, or the different things. But all of those are external influences. And so when we look at like, why are women catching up with men and beating them in the heart disease race, right? Once they hit their 50s and 60s, why are women outpacing men with dementia and osteoporosis and all those things? We can't just blame it on aging, because we didn't have this bad of a health span a few generations ago. So what is it that we're marinating in? What's our environment, essentially? What is our lifestyle that is potentially taking a natural aging process and amplifying the bad outcomes of it at an earlier phase of life? And so that's something where we could just go back to. It doesn't really matter where you are on this whole spectrum. What matters is you start paying attention, whether it's like Maria just said, living a toxin-free life or cleaning out toxins as much as you can. I think it's impossible to be toxin-free, to be perfectly frank. Optimizing your digestion and your gut health, being mindful to the foods that you eat, understanding macronutrients and not just eating blindly and unintentionally. Yes, managing your stress. You can't get rid of your stress, but you can learn how to blunt it. You can learn how to work on mindset and different mitigation tactics, things like that. So I guess I hear when we get into these conversations, some women out there will interpret them as this is this inevitability and it's happening to them. And then the reality is the aging part is inevitable. The ultimate loss of hormones is inevitable. The experience of it, however, is very much within our control and very much influenced by our daily habits. Not going to be a popular person on that one.
Well, no, but I think it's also refreshing. We've got to be able to speak some truth.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to have a little bit of that wake up and take some ownership of, okay, what I've been doing is clearly not working. So I've got to do something different. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And I think as we get into midlife and we're kind of analyzing like what's going on, we're kind of having this reawakening. We've got to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to have to do some things different because this is not serving me. Me burning the candle at both ends, sacrificing sleep, eating a lot of stuff that I know better, or not eating enough.
Yeah.
It is just not serving me. So I need to do something different. But we definitely have to take that ownership so that we can truly move forward. So you alluded to metabolism earlier. Let's talk briefly about the interplay between sex hormones and blood sugar and insulin, because we need that reminder.
Sorry, I have a bit of a cough. Blood sugar is prone to being less regulated, not regulated as good as we are aging, because estrogen makes us insulin sensitive. Okay. And so when that estrogen is in decline, or for women that don't replace, it is nearly absent. They just cannot regulate their blood sugar as well. So, and I would even say, even for women that are replacing their estrogen, they still need to be mindful of the fact that they may not be able to regulate their blood sugar and their insulin as well. It's great, but it's not what you used to be. It doesn't fully replace the ovaries, the work of the ovaries.
Yeah.
So
HRT.
Yeah. So it requires a cut, right? It requires an assessment. It requires, if you were eating 200 grams of carbs per day, maybe you need to drop down to 100 or 80 or 75 or something like that. It's just the body is fundamentally different. Most women don't realize that.
The other interplay with estrogen and insulin is that insulin uses estrogen as sort of its GPS signal as to where to deposit fat. And as we lose estrogen, that GPS signal is lost. And so for women, we traditionally, the body's kind of priority is to say, we're going to put it on the hips and the butt. But as we lose that estrogen, all of a sudden that insulin goes, well, this looks like a good place to put it, and sticks it all in the belly, right? And then women are very much at risk because fat around the belly can turn into visceral fat, which becomes fat around our organs, which I don't care how thin you think you are on a scale, you can still have visceral fat and still be metabolically unhealthy. And that piece of the whole insulin estradiol connection, I think, is what a lot of women kind of miss, right? And think that this is just aging. Yes, it is more difficult to maintain our muscle mass. It is more difficult to maintain a body composition and a lower BMI and things like that as we age. But the loss of estrogen makes it really difficult. And that piece of it, I think women, start doing the things that they believe should work, which is eating less and exercising more. That just changes the whole adrenal response. And then we get a stress response physiologically in the body. And now we've just created a firestorm.
Yes. And you just led perfectly into my next question is, as we kind of wrap up this first episode, is as we go through midlife, and the next episode, we're going to talk about hormone replacement therapy. Is it enough just to eat less, move more, just maybe eat right, eat different, and make sure we're exercising, taking some good supplements? How would you respond to someone who says, hey, I'm just going to do this the natural way. I'm just going to eat right and make sure I'm getting my movement in.
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's a great question, Jennifer. And we would never put down those things as unimportant. Maybe not to eat less, but you said eat right. We would never say that those things are unimportant, because they're not. They're actually very important. But the right foods do not, give you vaginal moisture. The right foods do not clear tau protein. I mean, food can absolutely be helpful for bones, but without estradiol in play, like, those bones are going to become a problem after a while. So we don't think it's enough. We think it's important, but it's not enough on its own.
Well, and I was going to say, as Jennifer was asking the question, enough for what? I think that's the piece that women need to start asking, right? Enough for what? Is it enough to maybe control a number on a scale? Sure, potentially eating right, moving right, doing all those things. That might be enough. Is it enough to maybe mitigate any massive declines in your insulin sensitivity? Yep, it might be enough for that. But as Maria just alluded to, there is so much else that women aren't paying attention to that is related to this loss of sex hormones. And the only thing that can do the things that sex hormones do are sex hormones. So that's to the whole, understanding the remodeling, understanding the brain, understanding all of these things that are impacted by estrogen, hopefully gets women to understand that even the best diet, nutrition, stress management, sleep, you wear your blue blockers, do your sauna, I don't care what it is, what all the interventions you're willing to kind of buy into, none of them at the end of the day will replace the actions of our lost sex hormones.
Yes, I love that. So that is the perfect place for us to cut off this podcast. And you guys are going to be joining me for the second episode as we dive into replacing those sex hormones, a highly controversial topic. So I'm looking forward to that. So thank you for joining us. It clearly takes more than just a one-sided approach, and we're going to continue this conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, wasn't that helpful? Just straight talk. That is so refreshing to us in midlife because there's so much chaos out there and you just need real talk with no hidden agenda. And that's what you're going to get here. I told you at the beginning of this podcast, it's not just a rebrand of the Healthy Harmony podcast. This is a commitment to you. I recognize the season of life that you're in, and I want to help you navigate the crazy and get the answers to the questions that you have. So be sure and share this with all of your friends. You know they need it just as much as you do. And here's the good news. We're not finished talking with Kristin and Maria. We're going to continue the conversation with part 2 of the Great Menopause Myth. And we're going to get into the highly controversial topic of hormone replacement therapy. So I will see you next time. Do not forget to download your free guide, The Holiday Hormone Trap, Top 10 Mistakes to Avoid. And I will see you next time on the Midlife Hormone Crisis. Bye, friend.